What's going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com. We are wrapping up, I guess, the first game that kicked off today on this Saturday. Auburn falling to number 5 Texas A&M. The final score there, 31-20. Matt Scalisi here with AL.com to break this game down. Obviously, I will say this first. Coming off, obviously, last week's Iron Bowl performance, we knew that Auburn was going to be out for blood, wanting to come back home, Jordan-Hare Stadium, get the juices flowing again. And they showed some hope there. Obviously, a 31-20 loss, certainly not no embarrassment, if you will, but obviously looked good at times, but just not enough to get the job done against the number 5 team. Just your overall takeaways off the top, Matt.
Well, I mean, look, obviously, Auburn was not the favorite coming into this game. I don't think that it was expected for them to win. I think it was viewed as a winnable game. And we talked about that a little bit on the pregame show this morning, that this was an opportunity for Gus to, start to reverse the trend as the season comes to a close. And, unfortunately, I think there were moments that looked promising in this game. And there were a few minutes of this game where I was convinced Auburn was going to win the game. But I think in a sort of indicator of what this entire season has felt like, Auburn couldn't seem to consistently do the things that it needed to do well throughout the entire game. And I think when you look at what was going well for them, again, it's been pretty consistent throughout the season. This is a team who can, at times, effectively run the ball. They're not a great downfield passing team. They just don't seem to have the accuracy and the communication between Bo Nix and his receivers. And I think it can be a big chunk that can help this offense get down the field, but it just doesn't seem like something they've ever really been able to build their offense around and rely on consistently.
Yeah, no doubt. And kind of just looking at, some things that stand out to me, Auburn's third down defense, not good. And I think that's one area that has been a problem for them throughout, much of the season. Obviously, one of the lacking third down defense, obviously one of the worst in the SEC. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that hurt them, because it was like they would get some momentum, obviously get a couple of big stops, and then Kellen Mond would, rip off 11, 12, 13 yards, explosive play, and then the ball moves. I mean, even to open the game, I don't even know how long that first drive was, but for Texas A&M, but they, chewed up the clock, obviously kept converting on third down. And so, I think that to me is a blaring issue. And then I want to get your thoughts on this. We see two different Bo Nixes here. And I think that's kind of the storyline going in. Obviously, you've got Bo Nix at home, Bo Nix on the road. And then in this game, the narrative even goes a step further. Bo Nix running versus Bo Nix passing. Two totally different quarterbacks here in that space.
Yeah, look, I think they're related to each other for sure. And when you see a team having a frustrating and disappointing season, you do often see the defense start to give up, more and more over the course of the season as you get towards the end of the season. Some of that is frustration. Some of that is physically just getting worn down over the course of the year. You're having to carry the team for so much of the season. You can only do that for so many games. And I think that's a little bit what we're seeing here. Could Auburn's defense have played better? I'm sure they were capable of it, but I think they were not put in a great position to succeed today. I think they didn't have a ton of support from the other side of the ball, and they often did get put in pretty tough positions. I think it's really telling that Auburn gave up as much as they did on the ground today, because we know that Auburn has the talent and the discipline to be one of the best rushing defenses in college football. We saw it earlier this season. It fell apart today. They end up giving up 6.7 yards per carry on the ground to this Texas A&M team. And that's a really good offensive line that Texas A&M has. And Isaiah Spiller's a really good running back. Mm-hmm. But this Auburn defense, if everything's going well and they're at their best and they're fresh and they're healthy, they don't give up 313 yards on the ground to even a really good SEC offense. This, I think, is fatigue playing out over the course of the season. And you go back to, you mentioned Bo Nix and the inconsistency of it. I think even when Bo Nix was doing good things today, and he did do some really good things, he is a dynamic athlete. He can escape, as we saw during this game.
Incredible. Yeah, you can't shy away from obviously that athleticism. That play they showed over and over, that will certainly be in the highlight reel.
Yeah, and look, you can't build an offense around that because that wasn't the play call. But if you have a guy with that athleticism, you can build an offense around that ability. And I just don't really think that Auburn ever did that this year. Put it on Gus Malzahn, put it on Chad Morris, whatever. They have really talented pieces in this Auburn offense. And I don't feel like the play calling over the course of this season did enough to take advantage of that. I think that some of it is player development over time. But again, it's hard to put it too much on the players for me when I see these guys making individual efforts every week that are really impressive and make Sports Center highlight reels. They are talented and they can make plays when they get put in a position to make them. I just don't think they were put in enough positions to make plays with their athleticism this season. And that ultimately comes down to play calling.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, Texas A&M picked up 509 total yards, and Tom Green had tweeted this out. That's the most allowed by Auburn since last year's Iron Bowl, which they'd given up 515. So, somewhat uncharacteristic, obviously, for this Auburn defense that we've seen really grow and improve throughout the season. I mean, really has been pretty consistent through much of the season. And then, just kind of looking at the statistics going down the line, the total yards, Auburn. So Texas A&M had 509 total yards, Auburn 340. Only 144 passing yards for Auburn. We talked about that. I think that being certainly an area and some missed opportunities. We saw last week, I think one of the big plays that stuck out on the Auburn side was that, the drop that Seth Williams had wide open going into the end zone, going into the second or going into halftime last week, that could have been a complete momentum shift. And I think we saw much of the same thing from Auburn, some overthrows, Bo Nix obviously just not being consistent on his targets. And, just some missed opportunities, not only offensively, but defensively, with some interceptions and potential game changers, momentum shifts, and being able to pick up the ball and maybe get points going the other way. So that kind of stood out to me. And then, of course, rushing yards, Texas A&M had 313 rushing yards. Auburn ended up having 196. And, I guess the one question, Matt, I have for you is, Tank Bigsby, obviously questionable. He's been questionable these last couple of weeks. Is dealing with the hip injury. I don't think he was 100%, but listening to the broadcast and those down on the field, he looked fine during warmups, looked like he was getting around, was in great spirits. But he didn't come in until a little bit later. And we talked a little bit before the broadcast, but just your thoughts on sort of the game plan and how they decided to use Tank Bigsby. Because I guess for yards, he had 9 carries, 76 yards. So, not terrible for just 9 carries. Certainly.
Not on 9 carries. That's not a bad number. I mean, especially for a guy that's banged up. And Sean Shivers had 68 yards on 9 carries, which, again, that's also pretty good. Those numbers extrapolated out into big numbers. Those are good enough averages that you should be able to hammer the ball down the field on Texas A&M. And for several drives, Auburn did do that. They were finding a groove and running the ball successfully against Texas A&M. And a lot of times it's just calling the wrong play at the wrong time in the wrong situation that can throw off your entire drive. I think the perfect example, and I saw a lot of Auburn fans on social media kind of throw their hands up at this moment. Auburn hammers their way down the field, gets into a great position to score, and potentially almost take control of the game. And Bo Nix badly overthrows a wide open, uncovered receiver who's heading to the end zone. And look, every quarterback's got throws he's going to want back. I would say more than anything, my question at that moment is, the coaches sort of know what their odds are at this point throwing down the field, right? At one point during the broadcast, we heard the stat that Bo Nix is 36% in terms of completions when he's throwing more than 10 yards down the field. That's not good. That's a bad gamble to take. And look, he should be better at that at this point. but he's not. And I think at this point in the season, you know what you are. You know that you're running the ball well and effectively against this defense. And I just don't quite understand the decision to go away from that at key moments in the game. So to me, I think that Auburn has shown the ability with the personnel they have right now to run the ball effectively. I think assuming everything, all the pieces come back next year and that this team is relatively intact, I think part of the formula that Auburn needs to look at when they rethink this offense for 2021 is, what's our ratio of run to pass? How can we mix this up to, first of all, put Bo Nix in a better position to open up his game, but secondly, just do what we do well. Take advantage of the talent that we have. Auburn has a deep running back stable, and they're going to lose Sean Shivers, but presumably Tank Bigsby comes back, Mark Anthony Richards comes back. A number of young, promising backs are on this team, and these guys run hard and they understand the offense pretty well. So to me, I think where the next step is for Auburn is they've got to find a way to rethink this offense in a way that puts them in a better position to take advantage of the talent they have on the roster.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. And before we wrap up, obviously a final score there, Texas A&M 31, Auburn 20. And honestly, I think Texas A&M really came in as good as advertised. I think they produced and did exactly kind of what we expected. And it was sort of up to Auburn to get a few big stops. Obviously, slow the bleeding in terms of scoring. And Texas A&M was able to just move the football, the offensive line.
Yeah. I should say, Lauren, I'm being pretty harsh here on Auburn and on their coaching staff. This is the number 5 team in college football. This is not some inexcusable loss to a scrub team that Auburn should be better than. Texas A&M is on the doorstep of the playoffs, and I think it's frustrating to see a team like Auburn that, in my opinion, could have been better than they were this season. They had opportunities to accomplish things that they didn't. I don't think I expect this Auburn team to have competed against Alabama last week. Today shows, though, they are good enough to compete with almost everybody they play against. And I think that's what's tough for fans to watch is seeing the potential and not living up to it on a consistent basis. But in terms of losing to Texas A&M, nothing to be ashamed of. This is a really good team.
Yeah, no doubt. So Auburn now 5-4 on the season. Up next, they get the game that was postponed earlier against Mississippi State will be played next week on December 12th. Still awaiting a time and network for that. So in essence, I think Auburn could go in and win that game. That will be on the road in Starkville, and has an opportunity to win that game, break even at 6-6 on the season. And I would assume at this point that punches their ticket to a bowl game. Kind of sort of waiting to see how things shake out, because there is a chance that some teams that don't get 6 wins could still potentially be eligible. We don't really know what that's going to look like, or at least I don't quite understand what that I guess postseason is going to look like. At this point. It could be very interesting.
I think that Auburn will be in a bowl game, and I think anybody who in the SEC who basically wants to play in a bowl game is probably going to be able to. But I think that this is a team, again, Auburn's record is disappointing, but this is a team with a ton of talent, and I think that they will be a tough assignment against whatever team that they end up drawing in a bowl game.
Yep. I appreciate that, Matt. Good insight. I was looking at the comments here. Lots of comments to go around. Our buddy Calvin Battles got he's been jumping in here quite a bit. So get a little distracted sometimes watching these comments fly down. Hey, we appreciate you guys, though, for watching. We appreciate the breakdown. Gus Malzahn talking right now. So tune into our social channels for his comments after the football game, as well as some of the other players. We'll have the instant analysis. Well, Matt Scalisi, appreciate you as always.